So earlier today we've heard about the ACT UK project, which is one of the many approaches and projects to addressing textile waste in the UK. We recognise that a range of solutions exist, and many of you in this room are leading the way with groundbreaking methods, trials, innovations and research focused on reducing, reusing and recycling textiles. Your contributions are essential in helping minimise the waste we generate. And for a final presentation of the day, I'd like to welcome Kirsty McGregor, Executive European Editor at Vogue Business, who is going to chair the discussion on the topic of solutions beyond textile waste management. Kirsty will be joined by Tim Cross, Director of the Circular Textiles Foundation, Jenny Holloway, CEO of Fashion Enter, and Tony Burns, COO of ACS Clothing, to discuss some of the projects that they are working on in this area.
Welcome, my panel. Can everyone hear me okay? Brilliant. I have to say I'm absolutely impressed and amazed by the amount of detail we've heard today and some of the amazing hard work that's going into some of these solutions that are being developed. I have the absolute pleasure now of chairing this panel where we're going to talk about how we increase the proportion of clothing that can go into some of these, the textile recycling that we've been hearing about, but also how we actually just reduce the amount of textile waste that's being produced, which obviously is a key thing that we need to move to. So thank you to my panel for joining me. I'm going to come to you, Tim, first, I think, sorry, but just to explain what it is that you're doing at the Circular Textiles Foundation to kick us off, and then we'll come to the other panelists.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to just give you an idea on how I got here, because I didn't take the normal route. I've got a background in design and manufacturing clothing. About 5-6 years ago, I realized that we were making hundreds of thousands of garments that were completely unrecyclable. I wanted to know why. And if we could find out why, could we build a system to recycle the clothing? And most of the clothing I was making was polyester. So I needed to try and figure out how we recycle polyester. And that led to Project Plan B, which basically was an idea that if you design clothing to be recycled, you could recycle it. You just needed then to have the machine to recycle the clothing you've now designed to be recycled through the machine. So I did both. I built a machine to recycle the polyester clothing, which is now up and running, partnering with Satcol in Kettering, and it's brilliant, and I love it. But it only works if you design the clothing to be recycled through it. And we thought, well, maybe we're on our own with that one. Maybe it's just us. And it turns out, actually, no, it's not just us. It's every recycling system needs clothing designed to be recycled so it can go through it. So whether you're Recover or if you're Sodra, Lensing, Circulose, you need clothing designed to be recycled so it can go through it. And it was interesting when Gerard was giving some numbers earlier on EPR, 97% think that design for recyclability should be in there, and I completely agree. So I set up the Circular Textiles Foundation about 2 years ago to see if we could advocate for circular design, so making garments last longer, making sure that they could be resold, making sure that they could be repaired, but ultimately, at the end of its life, make sure that valuable resource that we put into making that garment, we could get that resource back at end of life. And that was really why we built the Circular Textiles Foundation, and it's just flown. And the uptake from large volume manufacturers and retailers in this space has been overwhelming. And I've been really surprised that actually it is in the large volume suppliers and retailers that have the most interest in changing the way they make their clothing so that it can be recycled at end of life.
Okay, that's interesting. Because I was going to say, it's obviously the sort of high volume fast fashion players where we can make the most difference, right, if we change the way that they're doing things. So how can they incorporate some of this sort of designing for the end of life principles into the way that they operate?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is that even if a garment is recyclable, very few people know it. The designer doesn't know whether it's recyclable, and the recycler doesn't know if it's recyclable. But the recycler will know that if it's designed to be recycled, he can recycle it. So you're trying to sort of approach it from those 2 points. If the large volume manufacturers know that a huge chunk of their clothing is already recyclable, and they do know that because that's already in their bill of materials, then they've already worked out that actually, and I was speaking to Joe about this earlier, when they looked at it, 50% of the clothing is already recyclable through existing technologies. 50%. So you've already got halfway there. So why wouldn't you then go a little bit further? And Tesco reckoned that perhaps if they went a little bit further and maybe tweaked one or two things. So if you've got a polyester garment with nylon buttons and you swap the nylon buttons for polyester buttons, you've now made it recyclable. If you do that, all of a sudden you've gone from 50 to 70%. Is that something that we should be doing because it's really easy to do? Or is that something that maybe we've just been forgetting that actually we are designers, we're creators, and we can make garments however we like?
I want to stick with the theme about how we can kind of get brands on board with operating in different ways. And Tony, if you could tell us a bit about what you do at ACS. And I'm particularly interested to know how brands interact with you when it comes to circular business models, how you get past that idea that somehow they operate on a certain way with profit margins in mind, and you're looking at a completely different model. So how do you talk them into it, essentially?
Thanks, Kirsty. Well, we enable circular business models in the fashion industry. Historically, it's been clothing rental, like the suit I'm wearing today, but we rent everything from ladies' wear, dresses, blouses, skirts, to subscription clothing, to we rent tents, ski wear, wetsuits, handbags, shoes, and clothing rental for us is growing. However, it's actually becoming a smaller percentage of what we do as a whole. What's growing even faster is the cleaning and repair of pre- and post-consumer textiles. We're also seeing the growth of repair as a stand-only business streams. We're repairing everything from denim to warranty repairs on outdoor clothing, and we're seeing exponential growth in resale. Resale for us could be anything which encompasses things like take-back schemes to reselling items which are not in scope for the brands just now. Might be ones that are difficult in their supply chain, where we can take them in, we can clean them, repair them, we digitise them, photograph them, and then we can cross-list them on a variety of resale sites, everything from Depop to Vinted to Vestia Collective, and that all depends on the type of product. We can also create white label microsites that go on the customer-facing website, and that's another tool for brands to actually sell product via their own website. How do we get them, convince them that this is the case? Well, we need case studies. We need to prove to them that these models are profitable. We're getting there, but there's a long way to go still. We've had challenges with rental initially. Some brands have found that rental, they've had a lukewarm experience, and a lot has changed. So we are pivoting to a more integrated model with consumers or brands' websites, so customers don't need to choose discreetly between rental and resale. They can actually choose whether they make that decision on the one website, and we're finding that's a much easier way to get brands to adopt rental.
And Jenny, a lot of people here will know you through Fashion Enter. Will know you through Fashion Enter, but you're here specifically to talk about the United Repair Centre. I am fascinated by this. Tell me more about the project.
We have two main clients in the repair sector. One is United Repair Centre and also Recom. So Tammy and Paul from United Repair Centre, absolutely fantastic guys, very, very visionary, as is the two founders of Recom as well, Simon and Tom. They approached us because actually what is repairs about? Stitching. You know, you've got to have skilled labour. We at one point were making 30,000 garments a week when we had Wales operating and London. We're not making that or anywhere near that now. And while it hurts, it's also the right thing to do, you know, because of obviously with waste. But you have to upskill your stitchers. You know, repair is absolutely so different from making bulk garments. And that's been challenging, but actually very rewarding as well. We're now working with RUC, with Patagonia, Rafa, Lululemon, you know, and it's growing. You know, there is absolutely a major trend towards repairs.
And what advice would you give to brands who are looking to incorporate repair services into their offer?
I think it's a necessity, quite frankly. Patagonia have gone live with this. I'm not saying anything that's confidential, but every time they do an announcement about their repairs, it kicks their sales. We're finding that people have got much more loyalty to a brand as a result of that. I would also say come and see the operation. There are logistical issues if you don't do it properly. We actually have a platform with RUC whereby they send their products through, but also we're having consumers directly sending their garments to. And it is all doable, and it is also cost effective.
What are those logistical hurdles?
Well, what we could have boxes arrive one day, which you're not expecting, and then you'll have these single units come at the same time. So you just have to make sure you're very organised.
I feel like the attention on repair is really accelerating. You mentioned the London Centre is designed to handle 30,000 repairs annually, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
What about, can you talk us through the challenges in terms of scaling that up even further?
I think you've got to make sure you've got your labour force there. We had resistance from some of our stitchers. They were sitting there merrily making bundles of garments, and then suddenly we're saying, right, we're going to upskill you. You have to unpick a garment. It's interesting.
It's the worst job, the unpicking part.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and even though garments are supposed to come in and they're not supposed to be worn, you do get that. And there are some times where we have to say, I'm really sorry, but we can't handle that particular garment. But it is interesting because when we first started repairs, people wanted sort of navy on navy repair. And more people now are asking for a contrast colour, like it's a badge of honour to be able to say, I've repaired my garment. And I think some of these garments are outerwear, they're lived experiences. They've been up mountains. We're now doing lots and lots of rucksacks and bags as well. So it really is a fantastic movement.
I'll come back to that in a minute because I would like to sort of move on to talk about how we engage consumers in circular business models and the kind of education piece. And Tim, I'd like to come back to you actually and talk about CTS certification and the QR codes. How does that, or how could it influence consumer behaviour?
Yeah, so if you want to know whether a garment is recyclable or not, it's not really good enough just for the brand to say, yeah, it is. I promise you, it is definitely recyclable, because the recycler is probably not going to believe it, and maybe the consumer won't believe it either. So we looked at going, well, we know whether a garment is recyclable or not because we've checked the parameters, we've checked the design, and we're certified that that garment is recyclable. So if you've gone to that level of proving it, let's get that adopted by the UK IPO. So it is now, our certification mark is now adopted as a UK mark of circularity, well, recyclability of the clothing. So if you've got that on there, let's put a QR code on there as well. And that QR code is designed so that the consumer can interact with it. Not just the recycler or the brand, but the consumer. And that enables the consumer to find out what to do with that garment at either at end of life or earlier. And that could be very much, right, let's get it recycled. Yep, okay, but what about before that? Could we get it repaired? Well, if you know that the bill of materials is behind all of this and the DPP is behind all of that, you know what zip went into that garment. So it makes it much easier for the repairer to then know what to do with that garment when it comes back to them. But also, supposing you wanted to resell that garment, if you know that you want to resell that garment, all the API data is already behind it, so you could click straight onto that going, right, who do you want to resell it with? I want to resell it with eBay, Vinted, Depop. You're right there, all the data is there, click sell, the garment, all that data is still there behind it. And with a QR code, that gives the consumer the ability to interact with it. And I don't know whether that there will be, DPP will settle on a QR code or not. But the point is that the consumer's got to be able to interact with it so that you can then encourage the consumer to further interact with your brand, and you can encourage resale, repair, rental, whatever you want to do with that garment, you've got that information behind it.
What are the next steps in terms of making this more accessible, integrating it into the mainstream shopping experience?
For us, it's all about working with the big brands and working with those people that want to be part of this, because they know that they don't have any choice. As we heard earlier in the day, EPR is coming whether you like it or not. Behind EPR is going to be DPP. DPP is going to rely on a bill of materials. You've done all of that work. You can't avoid it. It's going to happen. So if you've done all of that work, wouldn't it be nice and easy if you could then just say, well, is it recyclable or not? And how do I avoid CMA guidelines on this and making sure that I know that it is recyclable and I am not greenwashing? Well, it's certified as recyclable. So it's not your claim. You're not worried about that. Somebody else has signed that off. And I think that that gives a tremendous opportunity for the brands to go, phew, it's now not on me, it's on someone else, and they have certified it as recyclable. And with that opportunity, you then hopefully, we can then have a sorting system that encourages, first of all, when you look at the garment, is it ready to be recycled, or has it got further life? If it is ready to be recycled and it's got a certified recycle mark on it, you send it down that route. You don't need to disassemble it because it's ready to be recycled. It's already designed to be recycled, so you don't need to remove the zips or the buttons or so on. It can go straight down that route. That makes feedstock easier for the recyclers, and it makes it cheaper for everybody in the process. So I think there's tremendous scope if we look at that certification model as a way forward.
Coming back to the consumer, Tony, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what the biggest barriers are in terms of wider spread adoption of resale and rental models from a consumer perspective, and how we can move past those barriers.
Well, first of all, the biggest barrier is awareness and education. Consumers don't know what actually exists, and if we had better education, starting at schools, about sustainable fashion, it would follow through as children grow into adults. But at the same time, as well as education, there's the concerns about cleanliness, particularly post-COVID. We have the tools and we have the equipment that can clean garments to a medical grade standard, so we know it's not actually a real concern. But again, it's about making sure that customers or consumers are aware that their items, post-rental or post-resale, are really clean. And from a retailer perspective, the barriers or the inertia is because they don't understand the unit economics of the models. So we need to prove to them that rental, resale are all profitable.
And I mean, that is still a concern, right? When it comes to back to the profitability question, we've seen a lot of the kind of rental platforms have struggled to make those unit economics work. So is it just a matter of scale as more and more people start to rent and resell?
It's a little bit of that, but it might be that rental is still nascent, and many of the early adopters have chosen a route which might not actually be the most profitable, and it might not actually work. What we've learned over the last few years is that consumers want to look at rental and resale together. They don't want to look at things discreetly. A lot of these businesses that you spoke about, they're trying to build a brand at the same time as actually sell the product, whereas the brands that have consigned the stock, they are established brands, and if they were renting their product on their own website next to their retail stock, they would have a better result.
So much of this comes down to changing mindsets about how we value clothing, right? And that's why I wanted to come back actually to what you were saying about different attitudes towards repair and having it as a badge of honor, and you're kind of like beautiful, slightly battered outerwear. And we've seen things like people with deliberately quite distressed luxury bags. It's becoming that kind of something that you're not ashamed of anymore. It's actually okay that this is perhaps not in pristine condition, but it's been loved. Jenny, talk about how we can push people further towards that, where there's more of a feeling of, I'm going to buy something, I'm going to invest in it, I'm going to keep it for a long time, repair it, because we're so used to really fast trend cycles now, aren't we? And there's so much desire apparently for newness. How do we get there?
I think there's always going to be that demand for newness. It's going to happen. It's fashion. And it's aspirational. But what we have noticed is that, for example, with Islington Council, every month we do a free workshop. We've got a shop as part of one of our projects in Fonthill Road, and the number of people that now come for free repairs, and it's getting that word out there, and they're having a go. I'm of that age when we did needlework at school. Mrs. Jowett said I'd never succeed, and she was quite right from that perspective. But it's interesting. People want to learn to stitch at the moment, honestly, and they're young, trendy people that are buying thrift, and they're coming in, they're adapting the clothes, they're taking out zips, they're putting new zips in. And we're also talking to another council to do a borough scheme whereby they have a voucher. Now, this happened in Amsterdam, and it was really successful. Now, so I think word is getting out there. And, for example, in Leicester, we're now looking at doing repairs and alterations in Leicester as well as a fashion studio too. So I think, look at Depop, look at all those second-hand sites. They are absolutely flying.
And actually, you see it on social media. There's all these little videos of things being repaired. They're so hypnotic to watch, and people love them. They get so much engagement. So I think there really is that kind of movement towards it. What role do brands then play in helping to shift those mindsets? Because it's not really, they might not see it as being in their favour to encourage people to keep things for longer, to repair them.
I mean, that's really the point about Patagonia, but look at the average selling price of Patagonia, that they can afford to do that. I do think there are uneconomical times when you just can't repair. We have a Fashion Technology Academy, and any waste that we have will go straight into the stitching classes at level 1, level 2, level 3. I don't think we can move mountains yet, but it's definitely happening. And more brands are expressing interest too. Not necessarily directly, but through the partnerships that we have.
On the consumer awareness and education piece, how can companies like yours work together to reach more people? How do we grow that awareness collectively? That's kind of an open question to anyone who wants to take it.
Well, not wanting to follow on from all of the theme tunes for today, we need to, as a lyrical poet said, stop, collaborate and listen. We do need to work together. If we don't work together, it's not going to happen. We couldn't have made the progress that we've done without working, particularly with Satcol and but the many other people that we work closely with RAP. And you have to do it. It's the only way we can get the kind of scale and learn from all of the universities that we work with as well. Without all of that interaction, we wouldn't have been able to make the progress that we've done so far.
Can anyone give an example of some partnership working that's been effective?
Just to follow up on your point there, working with academia, we have had multiple KTPs that have really helped us be more sustainable and also more profitable, and actually cut the cost to our customers in terms of the service that we offer. We've just been approved for an accelerated KTP, which is all about AI, garment defect and garment detection. And if that's successful, what it will do is allow us to bring into scope a lot more items which are at a lower price point for resale, because our biggest cost is staff. And if we can actually lower the cost of our operation, but doing that in conjunction with academia, the best minds in research, and this KTP or AKTP is in conjunction with the National Robotorium as well, which is using robotics as a tool to try and cut the cost out of our operation.
Jenny?
I was going to say the same thing. Actually, we've had a little bit of funding from Innovate UK with the Creative Chrysalist, and also, we are working closely with Adam and UKFT and the networking opportunities that occur that way. There's also a programme at the moment with Nigeria, which I think actually is important. We shouldn't just look at the UK. We've got to look at international partnerships too.
And I think this is probably going to be the final question, because we're already running out of time and everyone, I'm sure, is keen to get a drink. But touching on what Tony was saying there, what role do you see for emerging technologies? So blockchain for traceability, you mentioned DPPs, AI. How can these emerging technologies really accelerate what we're talking about here when it comes to optimizing circular models?
We've had QR codes with a system called Galaxis for about 8 years, and it lets you know who's made what and when and at what price, which is actually why we get a leading status at the Fast Forward audit. I think there's still lots of work to be done on that, and I totally agree with what you said earlier. You just need one QR code for everything, don't you now? That's where we're going to.
I think that ability to interact with the clothing is going to be really important. And DPP, we just don't know enough yet as to how the EU want to bring that forward. If we can make that work, and it will happen, then the ability to then interact with the bill of materials will be so critical. We did a piece of work with UAL, and Kate and Jane have been so supportive of the work that we've been doing, because what we want to do was be able to understand what the carbon impact of that clothing is. Well, if you know how it was made, you can then understand what the carbon impact is. That can then affect your net zero ability. So if you're then able to use all of that data to support your EPR, then you are going to make so much more progress. So yeah, I mean, it's all coming, and I'm very optimistic. So
that's probably a good note to end it on. Thank you so much.
Thank you.